Hello guys, welcome back to Any Narrates. Here we like to review stories that beautiful people, like yourselves, post on the internet. So, today's story's title goes like this. Wife of 5 years brags about cheating on me with my brother, just because she saw me talking to her sister in a restaurant. I reveal what we were discussing, and now she's crying, because she has nowhere to go and is begging me to take her back. Hey everyone, I'm using a throwaway right now, so it might take me some time to respond to comments and stuff. So my wife Melissa, 26 female, and I, 27 male, got married 2 years back after being in a relationship for 4 years. We met through friends who set us up because we had a lot of common friends, but didn't get to know each other for a long time, until they said that we'd be good for one another, and made us go out together. We hit it off and ended up married. Unfortunately, all of that was an utter and total waste of our time, because last week, I was told that I'd been cheated on by Melissa. For context, both of us have younger siblings who are the same age. My brother Neil is 24 and her sister is Isabel. Around the time of our wedding, a lot of people teased them that they'd be getting married to each other next, but of course that didn't happen. Those jokes also irritated my wife because she doesn't particularly like her sister, and the only reason she was even invited was because her parents made her. Melissa believes that her sister is always trying to steal her thunder and outdo her. I don't know about how it was during their childhood or teenage years, but as far as I've observed Isabel, there's nothing of the sort happening. I tried to defend her sister one time and told her that I don't think that she's ever tried to outdo her, and it's about time that she moves past all the bad blood, but my wife lashed out at me. She was really mad at me for siding with Isabel over her. Even so, I never said anything about it again, because clearly it was a touchy subject for her, and she didn't like talking about it. I liked Isabel as a person, and she seemed sweet, but I wasn't going to defend her at the cost of pissing my wife off. Neil and I aren't like that, and have always been close. I actually found out about the truth from him a little over a week ago, and it's all thanks to him that I was able to find out how irrational and crazy my wife is. So about 2 weeks back, I had received a text from Isabel asking me to meet her at a restaurant near my office because she wanted to discuss something important. She and I aren't really exactly friends, but I agreed because the place was close to my office, and she said that she was in the area anyway. I didn't think much of it, and met for lunch at this restaurant, which happens to be really popular among my wife's friends, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. Over lunch, Isabel informed me that her parents had just bought one of the beach houses in Cabo that Melissa had always wanted as a teen, and they wanted to surprise her with it. They told Isabel to break the news to me so we could plan a getaway for her, and then throw a party there with her family and friends. It had been a pretty big deal for her back when she was a teenager, and her parents were very excited about it, as was I, because I remember her telling me about it several times. So, we got to planning, and we're there for about half an hour or so. Like I'd said earlier, the spot we were at was pretty popular among my wife's friends. So one of her tattletale and gossipy friends saw me there with her sister and decided to send a picture of us laughing over something to her, just so that she'd get suspicious. Everyone knew how weird Melissa was when it came to matters regarding her sister, so her friend took advantage of that and tried to stir the pot. Unfortunately, she succeeded in doing so, and that was the beginning of a chain of crappy things that then took place because my wife got suspicious. I didn't even know that my wife's friend was at the same restaurant because I hadn't seen her there, and so I went back to the office and went on with my day after I met Isabel for lunch. When I came home, I didn't find my wife there, which was unusual because she was usually back home from work before me, but I figured she was working overtime or something. Only after 3 hours had passed and she still wasn't back, I thought something was off. So, I decided to call her, but her phone was turned off. I even tried to text her, but she didn't respond, and by then, I'd started getting worried. I kept trying to reach her for around an hour or so without success. I'd come back home at 6 and around 10 in the night, Neil came by. By then, I'd asked all her friends and coworkers about her whereabouts, but nobody knew where she was. One of her coworkers told me that she'd actually left work early that day, and that made me panic even harder. That's the time that Neil came by. I let him in, and as soon as he was inside, I told him that Melissa still wasn't home. I even asked him to try calling her, because maybe it was some issue with my phone. But instead, he sat me down and asked me if I had a fight with Melissa or if she even had her phone on her or not. He was acting very anxious, so I figured that something weird was going on, and after pushing him, he finally handed over his phone to me and showed me a couple of texts that my wife had sent him just a few hours back. She'd sent those texts around 7 in the evening, almost half an hour before I started trying to reach her. And I haven't been able to forget those texts yet, because there were like 4 or 5 messages that she'd sent all along the lines of, quote, "I've always wanted you more than your brother," end quote. "I want to be with you." And the last one was the worst of all. She just point blank asked him if he wanted to sleep with her or not. I was in shock after reading those texts and barely even registered when Neil had texted her back. He'd asked her if it was meant to be a joke, and she'd responded to him saying that she meant every word of what she'd said and that she wanted to be with him right now. Neil wasn't having any of that, and he told her to go to hell and blocked her. He wanted to come tell me about it immediately, but I hadn't answered his calls or text because I was too busy trying to reach my wife, so he had to come to talk to me personally. It had taken him a little longer because he'd got caught in traffic since there'd been an accident on his way there, so he'd been able to reach me only at 10. He told me that he didn't know what was going on, but he knew that this must be some huge prank or something. I was barely even processing anything that he was saying and just kept nodding like a zombie to everything that he said. He left after half an hour because he needed to get home quickly as he had an early flight the next day. After he left, I waited in the living room for 2 hours until my wife finally came back home a little past midnight. She was still in her work clothes and seemed like she was in pretty bad shape. Her makeup was all gone and her hair was all over the place, so I knew that she'd been drinking. I didn't know what to say to her after I'd seen those texts, and at the same time, I still didn't know what she'd done that for. So, to me, it still seemed like she'd just been drunk and trying to cheat on me with my brother. I waited for her to talk to me, but she ignored me and went straight to bed. So, I went into her bedroom, turned on the lights, and finally asked her where she'd been. At first, she said that it was none of my business. If I don't tell her where I go, then she shouldn't have to do the same either. I asked her a couple more times and then she finally got up, left the bed, and walked right up to me in the most dramatic way possible. She's around the same height as me, so it was quite daunting and a little disgusting when she got all up in my personal space, because she literally reeked of the smell of whiskey, which I hate, and she knows it's my least favorite smell in the world. But she got right in my face and told me that she'd been sleeping with Neil behind my back, and there was nothing I could do about it anymore. I took a couple of steps back, and she continued to walk toward me while bragging about how she'd slept with my brother and how much fun they'd had. I couldn't make sense of why she was so proud of it until she told me that she'd seen how I'd been so happy around Isabel that afternoon, and then it finally clicked in my head. She then went on for a good 10 minutes about how I had underestimated her and that one of her friends had spotted me there, so she told Melissa, which is how I found out the way that she'd learned about me and Isabel meeting for lunch. I waited for her to finish talking, and finally, after she was done, I showed her a photo of the beach house that Isabel had sent me and a text from her that she'd sent me after lunch saying, quote, "Try and bring Mel next weekend for the party," end quote. I explained to Melissa what Isabel and I had really been discussing and watched her expressions go from triumphant to one of complete horror when she started realizing what she'd just done. Once I was done talking, I told her that this marriage was now over and shut myself in the guest bedroom while she screamed and sobbed like a banshee. She kept begging me to forgive her and told me that she hadn't actually slept with Neil and that it was all a lie, but I knew that she'd tried and that was bad enough for me. I just stayed silent and said nothing while she banged against the door and asked me to forgive her, but I was too hurt, too angry, and just way too emotionally overwhelmed to even hear her out. We were up till 4 in the morning, and by then, she'd stopped screaming, but she was still crying and I could hear her sniffing and heaving every couple of minutes. I couldn't fall asleep, so I just stayed awake. Then around 4:30 I think, we finally went to sleep, but since she'd been sitting outside the door, she fell asleep right there. And when I finally woke up at 9, I opened the door and she also woke up because she'd been resting against the door while sleeping. Once she stood up, she tried to hug me and asked me to forgive her for whatever she'd said and tried to do, but I just stood there like an unresponsive mannequin because I really didn't know how to react to any of this. I told her I needed time and space away from her, and maybe I wouldn't come back to her even after that because she'd really screwed up this time. We've had our fair share of ups and downs before, but that incident really made me lose any trust I had in our marriage and our relationship altogether. She started crying again, but I couldn't handle it anymore, so I just packed my necessary things up as quickly as I could manage and got out of there. I've been living in a hotel since, but neither have I spoken to an attorney, nor have I mustered up the courage to face the fact that I'm gonna have to file for divorce. She's been calling me every single day, and I just let it ring because I don't know what to do anymore. Yesterday she texted me and told me that I was being crazy and that there was no need for me to get so mad over something that didn't even really happen, referring to the text that she'd sent to Neil. I don't know if this is just me being delusional right now, or if that actually makes sense, but I've been thinking about it, and I guess she's not entirely wrong. But then there's the fact that she'd actually sent those texts, so if Neil had agreed, she'd have gone through with that affair. I texted her back this morning and told her the same thing, but she said that she wouldn't have, and she only wanted to scare me with those texts, which is why she'd send them, but she had no real intention of hooking up with my brother. Then she sent me another text saying that she was heartbroken and that she just needed another chance to prove to me that she really did love me, and me totally abandoning her for days over something that didn't even take place was a little too harsh. I honestly don't know what to think anymore. This last week has been absolutely insane for me, and all I've been doing is going to work and then coming back to the hotel. That's it. I haven't spoken to anyone else about this because I still haven't been able to make sense of it or even come to terms with what happened. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and even talking about this right now is taking up so much of my mental energy and peace. All I want to do is just pretend nothing ever happened and go back to my happy and normal life with Melissa. I keep thinking about whether she would actually have had an affair if Neil had said yes, and I really can't imagine that happening because everything aside, she's always loved me, and perhaps more than she's loved anyone else ever. So that's really saying something, and I feel weird about everything now. I want her back, but I don't know if I should go back, so I'm here on Reddit to ask about what to do right now, because I'm just so lost. She was wrong, I understand that, and she's acknowledged and apologized for it. Now I just want to know if I am the a-hole for leaving her over this supposed affair with my brother that actually didn't even happen. Hey everyone, it's been 2 weeks since I last posted here, so I am sorry for the long gap. I hear y'all, I do. I'm not getting back with Melissa, and I'm certainly not going to feel bad for whatever happened because it wasn't my fault. It took me a lot of people and venting to finally realize that none of this was my fault, and I was never the a-hole. It was just her trying to make me feel bad so that she'd have the moral high ground and I would forgive her. I get that now. Let's just forget whatever I said. I was clearly not thinking right, and it's embarrassing to even read my own post because of how distraught I was. but I'm feeling less emotional now. First off, Neil had put me in touch with a lawyer a couple of days back, and we filed for divorce already. I have blocked her everywhere else as well. Of course, I had to tell Isabel what had happened because she'd continued to text me to ask about the party, but after I informed her about everything that had happened with Melissa in a voice note, she stopped texting after telling me how sorry she was. She offered to tell her parents about it as well, so I wouldn't have to take the trouble of telling them myself, and I took her up on that offer. Because the last thing I needed was another emotionally draining revelation. It already happened once with my parents just a few days back, who were very upset and very unhelpful, but I didn't need a repetition of that with her parents now. The documents for the divorce have been drawn up already, and we're going to file the petition in probably a day or two. Another thing that I've been thinking about is how I don't know where she'd been that day. I mean, I know she'd come home drunk, but that doesn't mean she had to be at a bar. She could have very well been at someone's place and drinking with them instead. It's cool if it was a friend or something, but she had texted Neil to hook up with him. So who's to say that she didn't hook up with someone else instead and just took Neil's name while confronting me because she knew that would hurt me the most? It might be a stretch, but I've been thinking about it, and it could have been true. It doesn't matter at this point where she'd been, because we're separating anyway, but I still want to know. I've considered texting her just to find out, but I know it's not worth it anymore. Even if she was with someone else at that time, it really doesn't matter anymore, but I just can't stop thinking about it. Neither can I stop thinking about her, so I'm just talking about it on Reddit, because I'm sure the people in my life must be getting pretty tired of hearing me talk about her over and over again. She isn't contesting the petition. I don't know if I'm relieved or disappointed right now. I haven't heard from her for almost 3 weeks now, and it feels like I've lost a limb or something. For so long we were together every single day, and now that we're not, I feel like I don't even know how to function. I am no better than a robot right now, because all I do is work, eat, and sleep. I miss her so much that it physically hurts sometimes. I guess I'm a little upset that she didn't contest the will, but it is what it is, and it's probably for the best because having some long divorce would have been worse for my mental health. At least this way I get to rip off the band-aid quickly, and that'll be slightly less painful than what could have been if she'd contested the will. I found myself considering texting her or going back home just to see her, but I don't think there's any point now. I might go back home though, because from what I know, she's moved out and is living with one of her friends, so the house is empty right now. Neil's the one who told me about it, but I don't know how he found out, and I have been too tired to text him back and ask him, so I don't know either. The hotel's expensive, and I can afford it, but it doesn't make sense to waste money when I already have a fully furnished home to live in. It'll hurt going back, because it'll constantly remind me of Melissa, but I've got to do it at some point. I don't intend on giving the house up, because I'd inherited that from my great uncle, so she can't claim it, and it's entirely mine. I might move back in 2 or 3 days after I check with my neighbors and make sure that she's really gone, because I would hate to go there and find out that Neil was wrong, or even worse, accidentally run into her or give her the impression that I've been stalking her or something. If anything, I've been doing the exact opposite of stalking. I've been avoiding every single thing that reminds me of her. Even weird things like watching certain shows on Netflix or eating certain things because she liked them. And it's too painful to even think about her or be without her. My attorney told me that we might have to meet with a mediator soon enough to sort our finances out. And I'm really dreading it because I won't be able to hold it together if I see her. I just don't know how I'm gonna do this because I miss her so much. And at the same time, I know she's the one responsible for the state I'm currently in. I don't know, man. I'm so screwed up right now. I just don't even know how to feel anymore. I'm here after the first mediation session with Melissa, and I'm glad to say that it was a lot easier than I thought it'd be. I'd probably built it up a lot in my head, but when I saw her today, it wasn't even half as daunting as I thought it would be. Things were formal, mostly awkward, but there was no emotional breakdown, and I think I'm mostly just relieved about that. She came up to me right before we were about to leave to talk to me. I'd come by a cab, so I was waiting for another, and that's when she cornered me to ask if this is really what I wanted. I took one look at her and said yes. Not because she looked less attractive or something. It had nothing to do with how she looked, to be honest, but more about how I felt absolutely no love for her when she was right in front of me. It just wasn't the same anymore. I missed the person I knew, but now she was no longer that woman. She was just the woman who tried to cheat on me with my brother because she'd seen me having lunch with her sister, who she was jealous of for no real reason. She was insecure, but instead of coming to me to discuss whatever she felt, she went straight to cheating, and if I'd stayed with her, then she might have ultimately ended up cheating on me anyway. I did ask her one last question though, because I really wanted to know where she'd been that day that we had our last fight. Now, I don't know if it was entirely true or not, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to know because otherwise, it'll just keep bugging me forever. So, she told me that she'd been with a friend of hers who had actually sent her the picture. That friend of hers was the only one who hadn't responded to me that day when I had texted her to ask about Melissa's whereabouts, so I don't think that she'd been lying, but again, even if she is, there is very little that I can do about this. We parted ways after that because my cab had arrived, so that's the last proper conversation that we're going to have without lawyers probably. So, I just got to know something unexpected. It was Niels' birthday today, so he took us all out for dinner to do this, and I had to go because he told me that he wanted me to meet someone. And it was Isabel. He's dating Isabel. That's how he knew Melissa had moved out of our house. I was really pissed off when I saw her first, but then Neil explained that they've been seeing each other in secret for a few months now, but didn't want to make it public because they thought that it'd be weird. He said that he's really happy with her and can't see a future with her, so I guess that's nice. I was concerned about having to see Melissa at family events now, or having to still attend events where she'll be present too, because Neil and Isabel seem pretty hard into each other. But Isabel reassured me that that was unlikely because most of the family had cut Melissa off. It wasn't because of me, but because after she'd been served with the divorce papers, Melissa had gone to Isabel's house and thrown a temper tantrum because in her head, this was all her sister's fault. Isabel had finally fought back, and that ended any relationship they had. Her parents weren't happy with it either, so they'd confronted Melissa about her increasingly psychotic behavior. She'd fought with them too, and now nobody in the family was talking to her. So it was highly unlikely that I'd have to see her ever again if Neil and Isabel ended up married and together forever. I do wish they had a happier ending than Mel and I did. My brother's a great guy, and Isabel's a sweet person, so they deserve to be happy together. I am happy for them, and I am happy for myself too, because now I get to have a fresh start. I've moved back into my home already, and I'm working harder than ever, taking better care of myself, and going back to all the hobbies that I left behind. And I know the future will be better than this. Alright guys, that was it for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Please go ahead and smash that like button right now, and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again guys, we will be seeing you in the next one.